Don't need that.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Trill Bro Dude, and today I'm having a very somber day, a very anxiety, depressed field Sixers vibe. Not feeling good about last night, but to talk me down is my buddy from Twitter. You know him. He's been on the live podcast now. He was at Slot Fest. We have the Emart. What's going on, Emart?
Yo, Trill. Well, I've been better, I'll say, as a fan, but I'm not fully discouraged despite witnessing a I don't know, a massacre last night. It was pretty bad. A runaway victory by the Andre Drummond, Seth Curry, Brooklyn Nets. They really took it to us, especially Seth Curry.
It really does feel it feels particularly bad when you go up against guys that used to play for your team, guys you traded away, stuff like that. And obviously everything leading up to this game was all Ben Simmons. We get into the game. Drummond obviously didn't have that much of an impact on the game itself, but you were in the building. What was the vibe like? Because I personally, I was getting DMs from people. I was getting clips sent to me of people harassing Ben Simmons in the street. And I was like, all right, I get it. I get it. People are mad. Like I said, you can yell, you can boo, you can do whatever the fuck you want, as long as you're not being an idiot. You're not throwing shit at him. You're not being racist. You're not doing some insane shit.
Right.
Do whatever you need to do to get that out, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, it felt like it really did take away from the actual game at hand.
Oh,
and
totally.
That was my concern, was we're going to lose focus on what really matters, which is winning this game. And the Nets were, as you said, it was like a playoff atmosphere, and they were fucking locked in.
Yeah, I mean, and it was really a playoff atmosphere. Like, I got there probably an hour early. I'm just an early bird. That's what I like to do, enjoy the stadium. So me and my buddy RJ, who I split my tickets with, we got there like an hour early, and there was lines wrapped around the stadium. There was definitely increased security vibes. I think they shut down a few entrances just to kind of slowly let people filter in. And I was hanging out with our mutual friend Dan Morgan, and Steve Jones before the game, and we were outside my section 116, drinking, chit chatting. And you could hear just kind of in, warm-ups, random smatterings of booze, so anytime I'd imagine Ben's just walking around, being a jerk. I saw clips later of him warming
trolling
up, but not. Yeah. Which good for him.
The two things that really went viral were the clip of him. The first thing I saw was him passing from under the rim back out to Patty Mills to shoot free throws. And I was like, oh God, you're this is on purpose for sure. That's the first thing he does.
He leaned into it. There was a play later in the game when they really got away from it, where and honestly, the crowd had directed most of their anger at the Sixers by this point. Ben was kind of an afterthought. This was sometime maybe in the third, where a ball rolled over to the Nets bench, and Ben waved off a teammate. He's like, "No, I'm gonna go get it." And he goes and picks the ball up, and he slowly holds it, and people start to boom. He wanted that. It was very obvious. So I hope we're all done with this. As a fan, I just wanted them to play and see. I hadn't seen James Harden in person yet. what a bad game to start with. Yeah,
great game.
I hadn't seen him in person for the Sixers. Yeah, and I mean, just what you were mentioning about lack of focus. Yeah, everything pregame was Ben centric, and I felt the Sixers came out that way. James Harden was trying to get shots early. He didn't create for people, and later in the game he only had a handful of assists, which is not. I feel he's at his best when he gets other players going, like Maxey and Tybal, who's usually a zero on offense. He at least makes some somewhat of a positive at times as a cutter, but yeah, nothing was falling for really anyone. And once it got away, it's just got away. But the atmosphere was playoff like people were there early and ready.
Yeah, and it does feel like this was something that you could have expected from the Sixers in the past, but it did feel like kind of because I've one of the things I've been talking about on the podcast recently is like James Harden brings this calming presence. Like you said, like he gets other people involved. He's kind of like been a little, Embiid's still the focus of the half court, but like Harden is the guy that will get you through the second and the third quarter. He can bring it home for you at the end of games. And when he was out of it, like when he couldn't beat Kyrie off the dribble, he even couldn't beat Goran Dragic off the dribble. At
Right,
one
yeah.
point, I was like, this pretty much everything from last night comes back to James Harden, because when Harden has been the focus of the offense, it's looked absolutely amazing. Before last night, when he was on the court, the offensive rating was like 130 per 100 possessions, which is like 12 or 13 points better than like the best offense in the NBA last season. And last season offenses were even better. So like so far things have been great. Obviously that's only 5 games. We got into our 6th game last night, but it's one of those things where it felt like the Sixers were kind of turning a new leaf. And then you watch this game and you just go, oh, this is Hawks game 1. This is Celtics series. This is everything. Even Celtics a few weeks ago, and yes, James Harden was not playing in that game, but it was just like, this is what we have come to know for the past 5 years. If there's a big game, it's on national television. Everyone talks about it. Everyone gets hyped up. The fans are there. It seemed like they did a little bit better when the fans weren't there, honestly. I think of the Lakers game
certainly
last year.
The home record this year is baffling to me.
Yeah,
I mean,
what is the
obviously
home record right now?
It's I want to say it's like 500.
It's around 500, I think. I think they're actually much better on the road this year, which is
weird. Not how they've been. They were like the best team in the league. They're a little better than 500 now. But basically before the Harden trade, I'm almost certain it was like exactly 500. And I don't know. They were one of the best home teams in the league. And I don't know why that hasn't I think, they're playing basically a max slot down earlier in the season, but the road record's been quite good. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me though, to point about Harden, they didn't come out prepared at all. I mean, that Harden has kind of taken over coaching responsibilities from Doc Rivers, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of like actually, getting through to players and making things happen on the court. And they just, as a whole, didn't look very prepared. And if everyone's taking their cue from James, early on in his stint here, then that's kind of what happened, last night. And no one could buy a bucket. Like even Embiid, who was able to make up for a lot of it at the line, he was pretty cold.
Yeah, I mean, he got to the line like 13 times in the first quarter, I think, and we had an offensive rating of like 89. Like it was it was like Embiid was living at the line, but because we couldn't make a shot, because Harden couldn't get people involved, because Maxey was cold from the field, and it was just like Tobias and Thibault are just going to be like, they're going to struggle when Harden struggles, and like Maxey's going to struggle when Harden struggles. Like Embiid really is the only one you can count on to generate his own offense regularly.
To Tobias's credit, it was a decent box score offensive night for him. He had decent. Yeah, he made most of his. It was 4 for 5. That's pretty good. I thought from memory, he was shooting well from 3. He hit half his shots, but they were, as a team, they were just disoriented. And I'd liken this game. I would liken it to you ever get drunk at like noon or like early in the day. It's kind of like, for me, like as a fan, experiencing a runaway loss is kind of like that, where you're like, this is so bad. Oh no, I'm in too deep. This is awful. And then, like by dinner time, you're sobering up and you've kind of processed the hangover while being awake. That was kind of what happened to me as a fan in this game. Like I started to accept the loss basically when they came out flat in the third quarter. And it was just like, wow, they're down like, I think at one point, like 40 points. There's just no way they're going to come back.
Like it if they weren't. Yeah.
And rather than leave early, which I almost have never done, I stayed there and just kind of was like talking to my buddy RJ about the game. And it doesn't bother me, I think, as much as I saw online last night. And maybe it's because I'm a little removed from like the Ben stuff. Like I think I've dealt with that and moved on. But particularly like they're gonna have bad games. What I'm curious is this gonna be a trend? Are they gonna learn from it? You know, they're so
Yeah.
this is such a new group that even Harden said in his post game last night, and people, you know, dissect it and take it, you know, with grains of salt, as probably should. But he was kind of like, hey, look, like we lost, we got punched in the mouth, and we'll see how, you know, we respond. He felt almost like they needed that. Now, I'm sure they all would have liked the win last night. I would have loved a runaway win.
Of
But
course.
If they're going to get punched in the mouth, I'd rather it happen now in the regular season, to where they start to prepare for, you know, when this might happen in the playoffs. They're going to face good teams in the playoffs. They might face this Nets team. I hope not in round
In
one.
the first round, possibly.
Yeah.
If most likely the scenario is right now. We'll talk about this a little bit more in depth later, but like it is, if the Sixers want to get the 2 seed, which, you know, it seems like if they won last night, they would be on pace to do that, and like maybe now they're a little bit better in positioning to like kind of angle for the 3 seed or the 4 seed, whatever they want to do. But
Yeah.
like the most likely matchup that they would face the Nets in is in the first round. And I don't think any team wants to face the Nets in the first round just because of what they have shown over the past few games. And like, yeah, they lost to Boston and their defense was very bad, but their offense has been absolutely potent since Kevin Durant got back. And you never want to go up against a Kevin Durant led team in the playoffs, generally speaking. And one of the things that just kind of really stood out to me about last night is the fact that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving just looked prepared. They felt like it was like it, obviously that game technically mattered a lot more for them. They're trying to get up out of the play and they're trying to get to the 6 seed, but they played with a fuck you energy that towards James Harden, towards the Sixers, towards the fans, like everyone that was there. And like, you know, I'm trying not to overreact to one game, but it is very much in my nature to be like a reactionary sports fan. To think like I feel like growing up being a big football fan kind of poisoned my mind to the point where it's like, and I've had to like trying to retrain myself to be like, there's 82 games, we have 16 games in the playoffs. Like I remember last year, like just think about like the narratives that happened throughout the course of the playoffs, just the playoffs.
Yeah, right.
The Bucks go down 2-0 to the Nets last year before Kyrie gets hurt, and it's like, oh, the Bucks again, another failure season for the Bucks.
Yeah,
Giannis is
Budenholzer.
Exactly. Is Giannis going to
same stuff?
All the same shit. And then the Bucks come back in the series. They do get a little bit of injury luck. They run through the Hawks. They beat the Suns in the finals, even when they go down 2-0 in that series. So like, and once again, narratives are coming back out, but like, this is very much a part of just like being a fan, a modern fan of the NBA, of the Sixers, of whatever, where it's a reaction cycle where it's like, okay, so the Sixer, they do their Sixer thing.
That's right.
They come out, they fall flat on their face. They have a bad game, national television. And the automatic thing is every other fan base is making jokes. Every Sixers fan's having a fucking meltdown on the timeline to the point where I had to log off because I was like, you guys are psychos. And I'm a psycho too. Like I'm literally sitting here watching the game and I'm like, I feel like I'm being attacked. Like my nervous system is being attacked because I'm like, this makes me feel bad. This not only makes me feel bad about the Sixers, it makes me feel bad about myself. I'm like fighting off things in my own brain. And I'm like, I'm just internalizing Twitter basically.
Oh yeah.
And like all of like the darkest thoughts that I've been burying about the team, especially since Harden got here, and they're all coming to the surface. And I'm like, what am I doing? Someone tweeted at me, you should just stop podcasting about this team. And I'm like, really? Like,
I do appreciate, I guess. So it is easy to get like dragged into the quicksand of doom, right? It's like this snowball of despair where everyone's like, no, it's happening again, and this is all bad, and fire everyone and restart the process. And like, yeah, it's okay. I mean, back in reality, we're 40-25. We're sitting there, you know, with James Harden on the team. If you told me we'd have James Harden coming this season, if like I don't know, like that's what I'm trying to keep the perspective.
If you told me this a month and a half ago, I would have been like, wait, we have James Harden and we're the 3 seed and we're having a meltdown. Why? What happened?
Yeah, and if you said, well, it's because the Nets beat us, I'd be like, oh, like, yeah, of course. Like Kevin Durant has won back-to-back Finals MVPs. He's one of the best players ever. Like Kyrie, he's won an NBA Finals. He can score with the best of them in the league. They're going to be a tough out, and they were last year. I mean, whatever. Everyone wants to point back to Kevin Durant's toe being on the line. Like they easily could have won the title last year, and that was with Harden. Just because Harden's here. Now, what I was, I guess, most concerned with, I'll say like in a realistic way for the Sixers rather than like, oh man, they got steamrolled, they didn't show up. I think they'll find a way to show up, when these games matter. Because if not, then, it doesn't really matter what else happens, right? But what kind of discouraged me was, and also like, I guess last night, it's hard to analyze because when they don't show up as a whole, it's how much do I want to read into this stuff? But like the big difference is no offense, right? And they were bricking twos, and a lot of it is like, hey, some games you just miss everything. James Harden, unfortunately, and Daryl Morey know that very well from their Houston days. But the Sixers team was putting up like 120 points a game, and they could barely scratch 100, and most of that was 30 points in garbage time, fourth quarter, right? So that to me is what's concerning. I guess the other concerning point is, and this gave me nightmares thinking about the Hawks series, is Doc Rivers, is he going to exploit backcourts who can't guard anybody? Like you couldn't do it against Trae Young or Lou Williams, and now you have like son-in-law Seth Curry, who we know can't. He was the one being exploited last year, right? And Kyrie Irving and Maxi's like fast and young. Like just send Maxi at like this is where I hope Maxi finds another. He has found new gears every 3 games this season. But that to me is like that's where he can really just destroying small guards, and that's what the Nets had. It's Goran Dragic. Like these people they're not locked. They shouldn't be able to lock up Harden and Maxi. And last night they were mostly ineffective. And I don't know if that's a Doc thing. I don't know if that's a Harden thing, but that amalgam of a coach brain needs to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think the and this is something that I saw people saying, maybe not many people. There was one person who said it, but I did see a person who said like maybe you just start Danny and you go for spacing and you bring Maxi off the bench. And I'm like, Maxi needs to learn in these big games. Like he needs to be fed, which is very important. And like I understand that you have defensive concerns about him because he's very bad at screen navigation and he's just small. Like he's just small, and like he's going to struggle in certain matchups. That's just kind of how it is. But to your point, like there's no way that we should not be feeding him, telling him get downhill. You have Seth Curry guarding you who cannot keep up with you. He's incredibly slow. You're very fast. Like figure it out basically. And like if Harden doesn't have it going early, let's get Maxi some possessions. Let's get him going, because right now it's like, the option can't be let's just post up Tobias and Embiid. Like it's just like that's
a losing strategy.
It's not going to work in the playoffs, especially like
right.
Embiid. Okay, yes, you can post him up and like they'll double on the bounce and like whatever, they'll figure it out. But like when the shots aren't falling, try to figure out some alternatives to the things that you're so used to. And one of the things that and once again, like, I don't want to pile on James Harden because he's been absolutely awesome since he got here. And he's really revolutionized the Sixers in a way. And I don't want to be like, oh, this is playoff James Harden and he had his struggles in the past and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, look, we brought James Harden here not to be the 40-point a game guy in the playoffs.
Yeah.
We brought James Harden here to set up Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid to put them in the best positions that they can to succeed, and then also be that scorer when we need him to be. But overall, we need him to orchestrate the offense and not fucking try to ISO every possession and try to foul bait and just not get his head out of the game by just focusing on, driving and flailing every time. Like this is something that, like, yes, we will be the foul baiting team. We will be the grift and grind team. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, that needs to be as a complement to playing basketball.
Well, it was all grift and no grind, right? It's like that's what it is. You gotta have both. You can't. What is grift without the grind? You need them both.
Yeah. So offensively, I think they'll be fine. I think it was a bad shooting game. think the Nets came out locked in. I do have a little bit of concern about Harden not being able to beat those guys off the dribble, but I'm hoping that maybe there's just some lingering stuff from the hamstring, and then he'll be able to figure it out as he gets better over the course of the next few games, weeks, whatever. The defense is what I'm really concerned about because I went on a podcast 2 weeks ago at this point. I think it was the Pound the Rock podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts. And we talked about the Sixers and like what their ceiling could be as a team. And I said, well, their ceiling is definitely like they could win a title. Like, look at the fact that they have Joel Embiid and James Harden, of course. But realistically, when you do get to the playoffs, defenses, especially defenses that are built around Joel Embiid, who, you know, is a great, amazing rim protector and paint protector, and a guy like Thibault, who not only is he like streaky in terms of like, can he hit a shot and stay on the court offensively, but he's also streaky defensively because of all the risks that he takes. So like, he's not your prototypical lockdown guy. He's not like a Ben Simmons, really. Like, just to kind of bring it back to him, like, he's not going to be someone who's just like up in a guy's grill. Like, he's going to have games where he can do that, and he can lock down Jason Tatum or Steph Curry or do something like that. But there are going to be other games where he gets burnt and he takes risks and he makes the wrong rotations because he's still young, he's still figuring it out, and he also is just like, that's kind of built into his game. He's kind of a gambler a little bit. And games like last night is like where you have one guy who can capably defend someone, and he's blowing rotations. He's leaving Kyrie Irving open for threes. He's getting distracted. He's getting burned off the dribble occasionally. Like that, plus the fact that Tobias and Maxey are just being run through screen after screen after screen.
The team defense, I think it's going to be hard. This is probably their hardest learning curve because I feel you're seeing it actually really gel nicely with Boston, where, you know, these guys have all kind of played together in the last, maybe on different teams even, in like an amalgam of the last like 4 or 5 years. But for the Sixers, it's like, all right, Embiid's your anchor. You're going to ask too much of Thibault. Maxey's can probably stay in front. These smaller guys, but bigger guys will, you know, be a tough switch for him. Harden, I don't think Harden's been as bad as Seth was on switches, but he's not, you know, great. So with the Sixers, I think their best defense is going to be their offense. And I know that's like annoying, but and in the playoffs, you know, scores get lower, teams tighten up, but like they need to have a consistent way to score. And I think they'll have that with the Embiid Harden pick and roll. But I guess my expectation for this team is not to stifle people. It's to, you know, outscore them. And I think they can really do that. And honestly, the other weird defense, it's not, or I say it's weird because it's not truly traditional. It's loading people up with fouls. Embiid is going to be central to that. And even last night, like early on, they were doing that for a lot of the Nets players. Just none of their shots were falling for one way or another. Again, I think, you know, we've kind of hammered Harden a little bit, but it kind of comes back to him getting the whole offense going before he starts trying to win his own personal battles, right? And you know, whatever, people have bad games, but yeah, I think I don't know what their defensive ceiling. I'm just looking at, like, you know, and again, they played some bad teams recently too. Like, I wouldn't say the Knicks or T-Wolves are world beaters, but all their scores are like they're scoring above 120. Right. And like, that's where we need to be. We need to be putting points on the board because we're not going to stop a lot of teams. You know, we don't really have the lockdown for it. We gotta strategically make them take, you know, kind of what you were just saying, make Kevin Durant beat you, have him score 50 points and make sure that Seth and, you know, Bruce Brown aren't like scoring.
It's funny enough, last year in the Buck series, that was their strategy at some point, where it was just like, look, like, put PJ Tucker on Kevin Durant, make him work. We don't have a defender like PJ Tucker. The Houston series, Maury can tell you all about this. That Warrior series, if you go back and you watch it, it's like it came down to them trying to basically make Durant iso ball you to death, because even though that is incredibly hard to guard, it's going to be even harder when guys are moving around off the ball. They're getting pretty much anywhere they want. They're just getting wide open shots. And ultimately,
it's the lesser of two evils for sure.
Basically. And my whole thing is like, and it once again comes back to what I was talking about on the podcast, which was like the reason why I didn't like the Brooklyn matchup and I didn't like the Celtics matchup. Like I said, I'd rather play Milwaukee and Miami in the playoffs, and they might just be better teams than us. Like maybe they're just better than us. I don't know. But matchup wise, they're not like they are very much predicated on getting to the rim. And we have Joel Embiid protecting the rim and the paint.
Right.
I feel good about that. I just feel better about that than I feel better about I feel about like the Nets and the Celtics, who are predicated on jump shooting. And like, especially the Nets, like the Nets are predicated on getting to the mid range and making everything work from there for them. So like, Kevin Durant's going to shoot over 50% for the mid range. Seth Curry's going to shoot over 50% for the mid range. Kyrie Irving can get up there. Cam Thomas, LaMarcus Aldridge, like their entire team
it's just a hooper fest.
It's a fucking hooper fest. And because of this, it makes them incredibly hard to guard, because not only can all these guys create their own shots for the most part, but also they're really good off the catch. They're really good when like LaMarcus Aldridge can do pick and pops. Like there are a ton of different ways that they can attack you offensively. And like, yeah, like I think that the offense will figure itself out, but defensively, like I feel like the two teams probably we match up worse with in the NBA are the Suns. Well, three: Suns, Warriors, and Nets. And in order to win a title, you're probably going to have to play one of, if not all, or if not two of those teams.
Right.
So like at this point, once again, I'm trying not to freak out over one game, but it's also like it doesn't feel great that they exposed a lot of our weaknesses, especially on defense, because shooting happens, shooting comes and goes, but like defense is generally speaking more reliable. Like over the course, even in a 7-game series, unless a team gets absurdly hot hitting contested shots. That was my biggest thing, was like, if they were just going at, like, if it was just a game where it was just like, oh, they can't miss, but we're playing good defense.
Yeah,
I would be like,
weren't.
well, you got to hand it to them. But it's like, no, that was not the case at all. Like even Kevin Durant said in the postgame, he was like, we knew what we wanted to do. We got to where we wanted to go and we ran. They're a slow team. They're not good in transition. So we said, we're going to get them out running. We're going to, like, they knew all of our weaknesses and where to target us. And like, once again, kind of coming back to the Doc thing, like one of the things I felt like after the Hawks series last year was like, why does it, and even since Harden got here and they're gelling on the court and they're figuring that stuff out. But once again, why do we come out and do we look unprepared every single game? Like even these games we're winning, we've only won the first quarter in like one or two of these games.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely chalk it up to Doc's kind of overall personality with the team. I know, they don't practice much. They've practiced a little bit since James has gotten here, but that's kind of his style. And I think it's a bad one. I think a lot of people feel this way, but it's kind of stubborn, and I think it's demonstrated to be a failure for a long time. Not since the Big Three, Boston Celtics, right? So I hope, look, it's hard to teach old dogs new tricks. People are who they are. I'm a realistic ending for this season, I think, is maybe they get over the hump and they get to the Eastern Conference Finals. If they run into a good matchup for that, I think the Nets will be hard to beat in the series. Ben or no Ben, I don't think Ben's playing this year personally, but our ceiling's up there. But to me, it's like in a coaching matchup, like Doc Rivers is going to get out coached. He's going to hang in too long, not make adjustments. I mean, we saw this on full display last year when Tyrese Maxey won them game 6, and this went right back to Ben Simmons for game 7.
He played 10 minutes in game 7, I believe.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think this might be Doc Rivers' last year as a Sixers head coach. I think depending on how they do, right? If it's embarrassing in the playoffs, then definitely. And if they get kind of far, maybe they hang on for another year, but we can't be wasting years. Regardless, though, so that's like the doomer side of me, where I'm like, here's our hard ceiling, and it's Doc, and it's I think we can win it all side of me is Harden's at this point in his career. He's empowering Maxey. We've seen it already. He has to do more of that. We saw when he doesn't do it, how everything just falls apart. But I think he's one of the smartest players in the league. he's one of the 75 best ever. I'd bet on him figuring it out. More importantly, he's hungry. Him and Embiid they want to win. Which I guess maybe. So it's funny with this Nets trade is now the Nets have something to rally around with the Ben Simmons, like,
for sure.
Even if Ben doesn't play, it's we were part of this trade and you don't believe in us anymore.
Even though the narrative from the media was the complete opposite, by the way, which is just literally just made up. That's the thing. Okay, so
basketball media needs to it needs to be abolished. We need to just shut it all down.
It's so crazy to me that coming out from that game, I listened to like 2 or 3 podcasts, and like generally after a bad Sixers loss, I'm like, I need to detox. Like I can't listen to this. But I was like, you know what? I did think it was funny. My tweet was brought up on Bill Simmons' podcast by Big Waz. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, the Waz.
He did not mention me by name,
that's
but
nice.
And he has now brought it up on 2 different podcasts. But I did think it was a little bit funny.
Was it the Maxey one?
About Maxey, and like all that happened was someone dug up the tweet. So I went back and I tagged freezing cold takes or whatever. Yeah. And was like, LOL. And like now he's like doubling down on it and being like, oh, look, Maxey doesn't show up for this big game. And it's like, you were wrong about Maxey. It's fine. I'm wrong about things all the time. You're literally
it's moving the goalpost, right?
Yeah,
I think if I recall, the initial point was, oh, well, Maxey's not going to be worth anything in a trade. And the reality was
nothing. He said, who's this guy you drafted 21st last year?
Yeah.
He's worth nothing in a trade, which was not true.
The reality was he was so good that he played himself out of the trade and had scored, multiple 30-point games within a few games of James Harden being here. But even before that, he's the reason we were even good enough to want to go all in for a James Harden trade this year. Like whatever. When you're in the take game, I guess you got to keep it fresh and you got to keep it moving. But that
was the thing that I thought was funny, was like the fact that he brought it up and was like, now I have to root against the Sixers because of this. And it's like, dude, like
just cut bait.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
look at Stephen A. and look at Skip. They know exactly when to get out. They're artists,
dude. You got to have thick skin when it comes to this. But it's basic. Once again, if you're in the business for takes, you're gonna have some bad ones. I've had a lot of bad ones, and I've only been in it for 1.5 years now. And like, ultimately, what it comes down to is like, I said the Sixers were going to be villains because of the James Harden thing.
Yeah,
the Sixers were going to be kind of criticized. They were going to be under the microscope after this trade, which I totally get. And I understand.
Totally.
And I understand why James Harden is a villain. He's not gotten along with superstars before that, or all-stars or superstars or whatever you want to call them in Houston. He forced his way out of Houston. He forced his way out of Brooklyn and blah, 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 blah.
He's had some bad playoff series and games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also he hasn't always taken accountability for things. Like he's kind of blown things off. Like the media loves nothing more than like a guy like Jimmy Butler, who's like a soldier and is like, we'll get better from this and we'll do all this. And like, he can score 13 points against the Bucks in the playoffs last year and no one cares. Right. And that's the reality because he's very good at marketing himself. Whereas James Harden doesn't really care about that stuff.
He doesn't have the internet, which is my favorite thing about James Harden. That's why he's like enjoying life so much.
Exactly. He doesn't see your tweets that get mad when he goes out with Lil Baby and Travis Scott, which in itself is like ridiculous. Of course, who cares? Who gives a shit? Like, if you really like, first off, it wasn't like they lost Game 7 of the finals. They lost a random game in fucking March I had to look and see what month it was. That's how irrelevant this game is that they lost a random game in March to his former team. He looked bad, and like, it's not the end of the world. Like, he can still go out and hang out with his friends and do whatever the fuck he wants. Like I just kind of going back to like what I was saying, like with the reaction to this, and I'm just shocked. And maybe it's just because it's Bill and Waz and they're trolling us a little bit. He's a Celtics guy.
Oh yeah, no, they know what they're doing. They know whose buttons they're pushing.
Exactly. And I apparently made Waz hate the Sixers just from one clip that I posted of a podcast from like 6 months ago.
Well, he's patently wrong, and people noticed that. Yeah.
So so they were basically both just saying, like, I found myself rooting for the Nets. And, like, I've heard this narrative kind of over the Nets are rallying around Ben Simmons and they're doing this. And it's like, how the fuck is Kyrie Irving, who just refused to get the vaccine, is sitting out, literally possibly ruining his team's chances at a title. And also, like, clearly was a driving factor in James Harden asking out because he was so worried about that. And Ben Simmons, who sat out for half a fucking season for the first time since the 1980s. How are these guys like the good guys and the Sixers are the bad guys? Like, I embrace the villain thing, but it just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
I think it's the fan base. So Brooklyn does not have a fan base. I think Clutch hired like 18 people to chant Brooklyn last night. You know, the whatever Brooklyn, the derisive like Brooklyn. Like, by the way, a playoff series, if the Sixers win, that's going to be a good one to turn back on them because it sounds more like a jeer than a cheer. But I think it's because look, really aren't Nets fans. So but Sixers fans, through losing and winning, I bought my season tickets when they won 10 games. So like I'm pilled. I'm in. And there's a lot of people like us that are process. We were right. You know, everything with the rights to Ricky Sanchez is basically centered around that. There's large communities of people online, certainly that are Sixers fans that it doesn't even matter how good or bad the team does. There's still kind of an air. Like if I wasn't a Sixers fan, I'd probably hate being
for sure.
Sixers fan. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like I get it.
Yeah. So, and I understand where they're coming from.
So we take priority over even anti-vax Kyrie,
right?
Ben Simmons basically trying to destroy like the players. There's no way he gets his money back, by the way, because that would be so bad for the NBA and the players union. Yeah. It would basically say, well, contracts just clearly don't matter, like on any level. It's not. So I don't see it happening. I think he's just going to take it. Clutch has already started to distance himself a little bit from it because he realized that not all of his clients are prime LeBron. And he can't just, guess what? Good for him that was his primary client. But I think it just comes down to fan base, and the Sixers still haven't won. Because, and here's the thing, I think every other basketball fan is terrified if the Sixers ever do win a title, especially the Embiid Sixers, because we will be insufferable. It will be the we were right thing times a gazillion, and it doesn't even matter if they never win a game again, because it will be like a finite story that we can, justice for Sam Hinkie, it'll be like all the characters of this
it's
journey.
True. Everyone's takes will look bad from the process years up through the Ben Simmons stuff, up through everything that has happened to the Sixers over the last few years. It will be a lot of more freezing cold takes that will come to the surface. I totally understand that. And it is funny because I've been thinking about it, and it's like, I was thinking about this before this game, but I was thinking about how and I think that Embiid would have a similar, like when Giannis won the title last year, where it was he went on like a media tour basically of oh, look at Giannis, and like all these clips of him going viral, and he was having a great time. And it was really cool. It was awesome to see like a homegrown star, like win a title with the team he was drafted by, doesn't happen anymore. But first time since Steph, it felt like. And it was really cool to see all of that. But at the same time, I was just thinking about the media's reaction to if the Sixers win the title. And once again, yes, I think they would do that with Embiid, but they would just have to basically eat crow on James Harden. And after years of dragging his name through the mud and being this guy is against everything we stand for, then I could never imagine them being look at James Harden just worked his way he just worked harder. He's a good guy. They can't say all the same things that they have said about every other superstar that have won the title recently is what I'm trying to get at.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I didn't realize I've always enjoyed James Harden's game. I think part of it was I was at the 50-point triple-double now. I think it was 5 years ago. And I'd never seen anyone do what he did. He was moving all other 9 players on 4 on his team and the 5 on the other team. It was like mental chess. He was a magician out there. And I love James Harden. I always enjoyed his game. So I don't really get the national hate. Personally, I think maybe because if he was in the East, maybe I'd feel differently if I was, Sixers running up against him and stuff. But so him being on this team, I have no issue with it, but I think you're right. I think that would be the thing that the media can't have happen, for all their narratives. And again, I think the process there's still this lingering, even though, Oklahoma City is blatantly,
Doing the same thing. Yeah.
they're not feeling a competitive team. Like what's going on? And they've been doing this now for like a while. But for whatever reason, the Sixers, I think it's, again, like our fans care. We're one of the few fan bases in the country that have fans who care, like when I was in LA for the Super Bowl, like there's not a lot of passionate LA fans. I know there's like some longtime Lakers fans, but they're online, but that's
what Danny said. Danny Green said. He was like, he's like, in Philadelphia, you see it in the flesh. Whereas in LA, it's like, I'm getting shit online. Like I'm getting some dude that lives in like Oklahoma tweeting shit at me. But like in Philadelphia, like they're right behind you, like yelling at you, and like they're in your face. Like they will let you know.
Yeah, I'm sure when Danny's out and about, like people want to talk to him. Matisse Thybulle, he lives in my neighborhood and he's friends with a chef I'm friends with in our neighborhood. And my buddy Paul, who's the chef, said sometimes he'll come into the restaurant and he'll have to put him in like a separate area because people like can't behave. And it is like weird, like I gotta think for
live your life. And
yeah, like for some athletes, like if they're used to, I don't know, larger market and people kind of not caring so much or not being weird. And I think if you go to a really small town, I remember someone was telling me about Green Bay, Wisconsin, like they worked for the Packers and a lot of people knew that. And they'd be like at the grocery store and people just want to talk to them about the Packers. And they were like front office, right? So they weren't like the face GM, but someone like it'd be, I don't know. I could see where this could rub people the wrong way. But the other side of that kind of weirdness is that it's passion, right? Like people really care. And in Philadelphia, I'll begrudgingly give credit to Boston fans. I think that there's a lot of care there. I think there's some hardcore New York fans, but they kind of get drowned out by how cosmopolitan and enormous New York is.
For sure.
And I don't know if it's the East Coast thing, where the weather's cold, sports matter more because you're not going to do anything else.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, it is. I don't know. I think there is like a bit of a narrative against the Sixers, and I for one just hope we do it. I'm excited this year though. Like I'm not going to let last night crush my general optimism about James Harden and Joel Embiid, because this is the best shot we've had, I would say, just from a personnel standpoint. Now, are they going to gel immediately this year? Maybe not, but next year is going to be a great year too.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, Morey now, like in the offseason, I'm pretty excited to see what he does with this roster, because you can basically set aside Maxey, Harden, Embiid. There's your big three. There's your Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Tim Duncan. But like, you can remake this roster around those guys' strengths, and anything we get this year is going to inform how this team builds. I think they have, at least 2-3 more years of contention. But you want to strike every year you can. I mean, I think about the 08 Phillies, right? Like they got there and then they got there and lost. Then they took a step backwards each year. Yep. And we look differently on that time. I think if they build up to a win versus they won and then they kind of tapered off.
It is weird like that. This has been building up for so many years now that it feels like we just need
we gotta get there.
Even the Eastern Conference Finals appearance would make me feel like there's been some sort of progress, or losing to even if it's like the Raptors series where like we get back to there. I don't want a Hawks situation again. Like if we get back to the point where we are pushing a Milwaukee, a Brooklyn to 7 in the second round or whatever it is, like however that breaks, that's a little bit different to me than like, because I feel like whoever comes out of those series are probably going to be the ones that win the title anyway.
Right.
I wouldn't feel like super gloom and doom, but I just like kind of going back to like the whole thing, and like, I'm not going to pile on James Harden or Joel Embiid or anyone, Tyrese Maxey, whatever. But like one of the things I feel like when we talk about like, oh, these guys have like, they've been to war together and like all the narratives that come out and stuff. But like, once again, I just think about the Bucks last year, and like they went down 2-0 to the Nets. They went down 2-0 to the Suns. They won both of those series and they won the title. The
Incredible.
only thing that I'm concerned with is Maxey doesn't have experience with that kind of stuff. Joel, he has shown over the course of a series he can wear down sometimes. And Harden is, has mentally checked out in the past. And
Totally.
one of the things I think that the Sixers need to try to whether it's this year or next year when it comes to roster building, is literally just getting guys who not only have the experience, but are just I don't care if we're down 3-0. We need to go out there and play like it's fucking game 7. And last night just had a little bit of fear creeping into my brain of does the team have the mental makeup of not to get too much into boomerisms, but the mental makeup to be able to come back from being down 2-0, or if they're down 20 in the third quarter of game 7, are they just going to fold? There are things about games like last night. It just doesn't feel like that happens all that often to a team that legitimately can win a title. And once again, I'm way more optimistic than I was before, but still.
In theory, that guy's Danny Green, right? In theory, here's someone who won, he's been there, albeit as a role player, but won multiple titles.
One of the best role players.
Yeah, knows what it takes. Knows the role. Seems like he's a decent teammate, motivator. So yeah, they need more of that, I think. And I don't know, maybe Harden kind of is that guy and we don't really know it. Who knows? Embiid, the way he's matured as a leader in the absence of Ben Simmons, to me as a fan, has been really cool, because the young Embiid Simmons is someone needs to kind of drive the team here. And the way Embiid's just done it as an MVP, it could be him. It could be him saying motivating everyone when the games really matter. I think it's the hard thing about the NBA. It's hard to know what to make of the regular season. You go on winning streaks. Occasionally you start to see trends, but everyone's going, 3/4, 80% of what we know that playoff ceiling of effort truly to be. And that's not to say that guys are, dogging it every night, but it's just a different game in the playoffs,
it is.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm excited for them, man. And we're barreling towards them. We are barreling towards them. I don't know who we want to play though. I guess I'd prefer the Bulls and the Cavs, just because the Bulls have never beaten Embiid. Let's talk about
that in a second. I just want to touch on the Danny Green thing, because
I
agree with you. At this point in his career, though, I've said this before, it's he's the 7th man for a reason. Worn down, he's defensively not the same. He still is going to do his same thing, but he's a little bit more of an old man game now than even he was. He's never been the most fluid athlete or whatever, but he could be someone you could realistically put on a star player and you would feel good about it. And now it's can't stay in front of anyone. He had a really good game against the Bulls before he got hurt. He had a good game against Miami. I'm hoping that can be the case. But one of the things that I'm just entirely confused by is him just I get it. He has a podcast, and as a fellow podcaster, I know how difficult this job is. It's probably the hardest, most important job in the world.
You, him, and Reddick. You just got to get the 3-man weave going.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was a shooter too. I get it, dude.
So that's right.
So it is weird to me that he seems he feels like it's his duty to do a podcast media tour in the middle of the season, going on Ryan Russillo, going on all these podcasts and doing his own podcast and having people on and openly talking about things with the Ben Simmons stuff. Just wait until after the season. Just wait until all of this is done. I just to me, that all of the information that came out about Ben changing his phone number and all this stuff, once again, it just kind of it's distracting. And maybe James Harden doesn't pay attention to it. Maybe the team as a whole just ignores it, but other teams don't. And if you're out there saying this stuff, Ben Simmons definitely knows all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And Ben didn't play last night, but once again, you don't want to give any fuel to any fire for the other team.
That's the bulletin board thing, right? It's
exactly. And
it's what Kyrie said as much last night.
Yep. And it's one of those things where it's I just wish he could kind of wait until the off season to talk about this stuff. And then next year we can deal with it. But during the season, I'm just dude, let's let's stay focused. I feel like this. I feel like the Sixers have made me into a boomer a little bit when it comes to this stuff, where it's like I'm buying into like the narratives that I always hated, but like I think that there's truth to it. Like if you had a coworker that was out there saying shit to people about you, and like let alone
all of my coworkers do.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
just like, screw this guy,
Yeah.
unreliable.
They're out there. He's like, Emart changed his phone number. Like I can't even get in contact with him. Like whatever.
He logs on Slack, and I know he's on, but the thing isn't on.
He never reads my messages. I'm always left on red. Like
that's right.
It just feels weird to do this in the middle of the season, and I hope that he scales it back moving forward so that we can hopefully focus on what's coming up here in the next few weeks. There's only 17 games left. We have the playoffs right around the corner. So let's talk a little bit about the seeding stuff, because before last night, I actually sent into the Discord because I mentally prepare myself for these things. I'm like, okay, so if they come out and they lose, what's like the silver lining of this? And the silver lining of last night's loss is that they are now firmly in the 3 seed. You know, I think Milwaukee's a game ahead of them. I think that Chicago's right on their tail. Boston's right behind them. But my whole thing is like, I would prefer that 3 or that 4 seed more so. I don't think there's a reward in getting the 2 seed this year, because unless the Nets jump up to the 6 seed over the next few weeks.
Yeah. It's going to be hard for them to do that, though. They'd have to gain 5 on Cleveland with, what you just said, 17 to go.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard.
That's a tough ask, because Cleveland, like, they'll keep winning. They're a good team.
And Kyrie still can't play in a lot of those games.
That's right. And to that point, actually, it behooves Brooklyn to be a low seed, because they'll get an extra game of Kyrie in a 7-game series, right?
Right.
So that I wonder if, not that they were trying to lose before, but or not everyone, maybe James was, but I'm just going to refer to Harden as James, like as if we're old friends.
Oh yeah. I do all the time.
So yeah, the way it's going to shake out here, and honestly, Brooklyn, like basically every game for them, and this is maybe why last night I'm trying to soften it. Every game's going to be like a playoff game for them, because they can't afford to drop to the 9-10 where they have to win 2 in a row, or like however it works as the play-in. There's just too much variance, like you just don't want to be in that do or die situation where you don't have an advantage of, getting your ass together for a couple weeks will ensure that you're at least the 7th seed. But I agree with you. I don't want to be 1 or 2. I think where the Sixers sit now, it's going to be hard to gain 3 on Miami. They just seem like they're winning. We had a good opportunity playing them, and we kind of punted on it for good vibes, which I'm all for.
I do wonder if that was strategic, though, because I think that, like, because we play Miami again this season, so it's not like it's like completely like we didn't want to show them everything, because we're going to see them again. Like, I assume that Harden and Embiid will play that game, but like, to me, it doesn't really feel like getting the 1 seed there's all that much of an advantage this season. Like, getting the 1 seed, if you're assuming that Brooklyn wins the play-in game, is a great advantage. But there's also a slight chance they go to Toronto and just have a bad game. Like, it's 1 game, and Kyrie can't be there if you're the 8 seed and they're the 7 seed. Like, it's possible. Like, I don't think Toronto's going to beat them, but like, there is a world where they beat them, and then congratulations, Miami Heat, you get the greatest 8 seed we've ever seen.
Right. Yeah, you don't want that. And then, honestly, Toronto, even, they're good defense. Nick Nurse is a decent coach. I think the Sixers beat them in a series, but I thought the Sixers would beat the Hawks in a series. Like, I'm not going to put anything past Doc Rivers' inability to lose to a better coach. So yeah, if I'm like picking opponents and kind of hoping where we fall, the 4 or 5, 3 through 6 is great, but 4 is probably ideal, because then you're on the side probably that Brooklyn isn't, right? Like, if say Brooklyn ends up being the 8th seed,
right?
you want to
Unless
kind of.
if Brooklyn ends up the 8 seed, you're on the same side as them, but they're probably
Oh,
going to
you're
end up
right.
7 seed. So realistically, there's a world where Boston jumps up to the 3 seed, Milwaukee is the 2 seed, and the Nets are the 7 seed.
Oh, yes,
So,
you're right. Yeah.
once again, I don't want to do the mental chess that we talked about, where like because we did this last year. We avoided Brooklyn and
it
Milwaukee.
worked out for us, and we couldn't do it.
Exactly.
What happened.
So I don't want to put too much faith in that, but just generally speaking, like Chicago and Cleveland would be a better first round matchup for us. Toronto, those are like the few teams. We're not getting up to the 1 seed, so I don't need to worry about any of the teams below them, but those would be the few teams that you would want to see in a first round matchup. And then from there, Miami is just a better matchup for us than Brooklyn or Boston, or even like, I just think Milwaukee has more top end talent. So like
Boston's defense is going to be a tough out.
Insane.
Jason Tatum might shoot you out of a series. I know he's taken some steps forward this year, but like their defense is going to be hard to overcome. And I mean, their point differential kind of speaks for itself, right? Like I think they're leading the East. Yeah, they're 5.7. And they've just been winning. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Miami's a better matchup.
2 or 3 months. Yeah, like
they're
not need to lose.
Well, they know who they are too. Like at this point, there's familiarity. Them and the Bucks would be that's the series I'd want to see as a fan because there's some history there. And I think it could be an interesting little bloodbath.
It's also a little bit of like a test case thing where it's like, what is the better team building strategy in the modern NBA? Because it's like we saw this with the Suns and the Bucks last year, where like the Bucks clearly had the best top end talent, but the Suns were a little bit deeper. And now it feels like the Celtics have a chance to be the Suns of last year, where like they're like really solid from 1 through 8, and like they have 2 guys who are really good, but they're not like solidified as top 5 players. And that's very rare for a team like that to get to the finals. Boston could very easily make the finals and very easily lose in the second round. Like that is kind of like their like ceiling and floor to me. As long as they don't get like some ridiculously hard matchup or have injuries, then that feels like fair to me for them. I will say that like Chicago, we just seem to own them. Cleveland, I just think they're too young. And like, once again, we said this about Atlanta, but I don't fear them in the same way. They don't have a player like Trae Young, Darius Garland, and Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are very good, but they don't have a Trae Young level player that would just give us nightmares for an entire series. And it does feel like ultimately Miami is a better second round matchup for us than any of those other teams, the Brooklyns, the Milwaukees, and the Nets.
There is a very real chance the Sixers play the Celtics in round 1 as a 4-5. That's a very real, and everyone's close enough kind of in the top 6 to flop positions, at least maybe 2 through 6. I think the Heat, they've kind of distanced themselves enough. Like I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting home stretch, but
that's my real nightmare scenario, by the way.
Me too.
Celtics 4-5 and we lose in the first round, because like it would suck losing to the Nets. It would suck. Don't get me wrong, especially because of the Ben stuff.
Yeah.
Because of the Harden stuff and all that shit. But at the same time, I'd be like, they have Kevin Durant. Like I talked about it right after the trade, where I was like, the narrative-based arguments on this are going to be insane because they have Kevin Durant. It doesn't matter who else is on their team. They're going to contend whether they have Ben Simmons, Curry, or whoever. Having Kevin Durant means you're a title contender. That's just the bottom line. If we lost to the Bucks, whatever, the Bucks are the defending champions. That's fine.
Yeah, they have Giannis, right?
Exactly. Miami and Boston are the 2 teams that I'm like, I might jump off a building if we lose to them. Like they losing to Boston again in the playoffs after like all of this would just drive me insane. And then Miami, like I just hate Miami more than any team in the NBA, to the point where like I don't think I can think about them critically. Like I don't like.
Well, they're like Lakers fans, where they just have not had the same level of success as the Lakers, but like believe they have because LeBron parked his car there for a few years, and like it's like, well, what they have this kind of like entitlement, arrogance that you get from Celtics and Lakers fans
without the history,
without the history. So that's my favorite thing about Miami fans, because it's all Dwayne Wade centric, and
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. That would probably be the nightmare scenario. Though I will say, in terms of like the demon exercising path, it would be beating the Celtics in round one. I'm trying to think
beating the Nets round two. If we get Nets
right.
and Bucks round one, oh my, that might be the best first round series since like the Spurs Clippers that one year.
That would be incredible. Yeah, I think it would be Celtics, Nets, and then probably Heat, because we never went up against the Bucks, but we've obviously Jimmy Butler,
Yes.
Kyle Lowry was part of the Raptors that beat us. You know, it's like that would be the like cleanse my soul tour. And then I'm trying to think what on the West. I guess it's the Jazz. I don't know. I'm trying to think of who would if Jokic. Imagine if Jokic just like dragged like
Murray might be back. So
right, but it's even better if that's not the case. If Jokic like say Embiid wins the MVP and Jokic scores like 60 points every game in the playoffs or something, and then that we somehow win in the finals, like they'd have to shut down NBA Twitter, right?
Oh my God. I think that someone in Denver multiple people might end up in jail. Although I don't even know if they really even have crazy fans like that. I know a few that listen to the podcast and just people that I know from Twitter in general. Apparently they don't even like air the games locally there or some shit. Like
they have a lot of like bots and spreadsheets that like pretend to be people, and they just send graphs. It's like
are we allowed to say that now? Are we allowed to say that with James Harden and Daryl Morey?
Hey, they yes, we can, absolutely, because they're not out there being weird about like made up stats.
True.
That always have an acronym that's like a cute thing that spells a word. It's like, you know what, whatever I liked about VORP is that that's still like not a word. I don't need it to be like LeBron or Raptor, or like I don't need it to be a thing. It can just be whatever the thing the made up stat is.
It was Carmelo at one point before it was
I remember that one.
Yeah, which is funny. But kind of just going back to this like seeding thing. So what do you think of this idea that like people have been throwing around there recently, which I personally really like, and it's not just because it would benefit the Sixers this year, but it's like basically if you get the 1 seed instead of automatically facing the 8 seed or the 2 seed automatically facing the 7 seed, that you would get to basically choose which team of the bottom 4 if you are the 1 seed, and then if you're the 2 seed you get the 3 remainders. Like, what do you think of that strategy?
I love it.
Playoff seeding.
I think it's cool. I think it immediately creates rivalries.
Yes.
I will give you a long-winded, better version of this that also fixes the draft and fixes we play too many regular season games thing. But I'll withhold that after we talk about this idea.
Okay.
Because you mentioned this earlier. I had to look up my stupid fix the NBA like manifesto. But it is related to this playoff thing where, 1 versus 8 is almost never fun. This makes it immediately fun because it might not actually be the 8th seed. It might be, like in this case, I don't want to play Brooklyn if I'm Miami, but maybe I'm going to disrespect Toronto and maybe now they feel disrespected. It's like, that's fun. Like that makes anything towards entertainment and fun. We got to do it. That's what pro sports are. Like, I know everyone, it's all about like, we were talking about Jimmy Butler and waking up at 3 a.m. and whatever, working in a mine shaft. Like, I don't know what the hell, like made up blue collar stuff we're doing. But like, if it's fun, we should do it. I think the NBA is the league that would actually go for something like that.
Yeah, especially because of the All-Star draft. Like, you think about like every year when Rudy Gobert, or this year I believe it was James Harden, got picked last in the All-Star draft. It's like it causes an event. Like, it goes viral, people talk about it, all that shit. Imagine if you just have representatives from each team there. Like,
like the draft.
All right, Jimmy Butler, which team would you like to go up against? And then they have to come up with some bullshit answer and be like, look, we respect the Toronto Raptors as an organization. Nick Nurse is a great coach. They got a lot of young talent, but like, I just look at some other teams and I think we match up best with them. We're going to pick the Toronto Raptors. Okay. The Bucks come up. The Bucks are the 2 seed now. And they're like, we just think that we match up best with Cleveland, or we match up best with Chicago, and then the Sixers come up. Like they all get to choose, and then the 4-5 seed is just automatically determined by the two teams that
Whoever's
are
left. Yeah.
Exactly. So in this scenario, I think it would be, I believe the Celtics are the 5 seed, so they wouldn't even get a shot. But it would probably end up being the like Celtics and Bulls, probably what it is right now, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do the thought. Just say this is how it ends, right? If you're Miami, I'll put you on the clock. You're Miami.
Yeah. Miami picked Toronto.
Who do you want? You want Toronto?
Toronto. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're going to pick Toronto.
All right.
This would also eliminate the play-in, but I'd rather watch this.
That's fine. I mean, frankly, the Hornets might sneak in there. I don't know.
If the Hornets sneak in there, I definitely take the Hornets too. Like I personally would just be like, I'm not afraid of either of those.
So just non-Brooklyn, right? Yeah. Okay. So then I'll be the Bucks, and I'm picking between the Celtics, the Cavs, or the Nets.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking the Cavs for sure.
Of course. Yeah. So now the Sixers are up, and this is where it gets interesting.
Yes.
Because now you have to pick between the Celtics, who have been the hottest team in basketball for 2 months, and the Nets, who have Kevin Durant. So, like, in this position, it actually wouldn't benefit the Sixers.
That's fun.
But it would give them more motivation to push for the 1 or the 2 seed, because they don't want to be in this position where they say, fuck, we're left with the 2 hard teams. So if it came down to it, if they said pick between the Celtics and Nets, who would you pick?
Oh man, I gotta go with. That is hard.
Let's just take the vaccine mandate out of it, and let's
just
Kyrie can play the whole series.
I think you still go Celtics. The reason being, one, I mentioned the emotional factor. 2, it's just the top end talent seems to always rule the day in a playoff series, and I know we'd have, probably the 2 best players in that series. Jason Tatum on his best day might jump ahead of, Harden or probably not Embiid. We definitely have the best player in the series. Now they're going to be in a better coaching position. Like if we had a different coach, I might say, well, we can just hunt small guards and Brooklyn, like whatever, we'll just win every game 135 to 125.
Right. You just throw defensive strategy out there.
I'd love to, if this was actually a thing, I'd love to just be the fly on the wall for like the team decision making. Like, I guess if it's like, say it's Daryl Morey for the Sixers, just coming up with all the reasons for each team and why you do it. And then inevitably they're going to pick the one and then they're going to lose. And then it's like, that would be, but again, this is all entertainment, and this makes it so much more fun. I'd say I'd give me Boston. I'd say that's what I take.
So we take Boston. I think I agree with you. I do think Boston's going to be really tough out. I wouldn't be surprised if they beat the Sixers or anyone in a 7-game series. But I do think that I think about it like this, where I'm like, I don't think that the Nets could withstand losing Kevin Durant. But like, if Kevin Durant had to miss a game in a series,
right,
there's a world where the Nets just get hot from the field and they beat a really good team in the playoffs, like the Sixers, like Kyrie, and like maybe Ben's back, and like, their shooters are on fire and whatever. Like, I'd feel good about us. But like, if Jason Tatum misses a game in the Celtics series, they're cooked. Like I look at what the Bucks did last year when they lost Giannis for 2 games and they won the closing game in Atlanta, I think it was, and like to go to the finals. And I'm like, I think I'm taking the team that, like, if they just have to lose their guy for a game or 2, like, I think that we would just, strategically speaking, would have a better chance against Boston than we would against Brooklyn without their guys, but without their top guy, I should say. So I mean, that's just kind of like you're splitting hairs at that point, but also the top end talent thing for sure.
Let me give you my manifesto fix the league in like a minute. I want to just get your reaction to it.
All right. I just want to talk about the last thing, which was
go for it.
Chicago versus Brooklyn in the first round.
Oh, whatever. That's Brooklyn in a walk. Brooklyn. I mean, come on. Does anyone take Chicago seriously? I feel bad. Like, there's not a lot of Bulls fans in my life.
Yeah.
But
I know a few.
I just maybe it's just because being a Sixers fan, every time I watch the Bulls, and that's the only time I watch the Bulls when they play the Sixers, I'm like, Embiid has 50 points, and like, it's just like, well, okay, like,
why am I so afraid of this team? Like,
yeah,
it does feel like they have owned them over the years for sure. But I will say, a healthy Chicago which might just be an oxymoron, is going to be a
Yeah.
pain in the ass just because they'll have good perimeter defense and like DeMar can cook. But like, yeah, I don't see Chicago beating any of the top teams in a series. Like, I think they could maybe take 2 games off of like on the best day, they could take two games, but I think they'd get swept by the Nets. I think they'd get probably gentlemen swept by the Celtics, and I think they'd probably get swept by the Bucks and the Sixers, which is crazy to say for a team that's as good as they've been this season.
Well, they're like the what is it? What's the Bill Simmonsism? They're the worst best team or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like
it's like that's who they are. They haven't really. I don't even know how much they've beaten these other good teams.
They haven't at all.
Right.
Season. Literally none. Like they've beaten no one good. Like they're 0-11 against like the top 3 seeds in the
11.
Yeah, they lost the season series to the Sixers. They got swept. They lost every game to the Bucks, and they lost every game to the Heat.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so
they haven't been healthy, to be fair. Lonzo and Caruso kind of are their defense. So that's the only thing where I'm like, I give them a little bit of a pass, but like you got to win at least 1 or 2 of those games.
Are you winning a series on those 2 guys?
No.
That's the thing. It's like they're not going to lock up. Like, yeah, you have good team defense, but it's regular season team defense. Like, I mean, just look at last night, like a locked in Kyrie and KD. It's like Alex Caruso is not going to make a difference in that type of game.
Yeah. All right. So let me hear your spiel.
Sure. Yeah. This is gotta get this off my chest. All right. So, because what sparked this, by the way, was just the concept of changing how the playoffs work at all. All right. So here's what it is. You add 2 teams, first of all. Okay. This is how you're gonna fix a lot of things. So you add Seattle and you add Las Vegas. You reorganize the NBA into 8 4-team divisions. I'm not going to go through what those are, but you just kind of do them regionally, whatever makes the most sense there. And the real benefit here is now playoffs with 32 teams. You make it a 24-team affair. Okay. Sounds crazy. The reason it's not crazy, you have 12 per conference, 4 division winners, they all get a bye. So now winning the division matters. Now, like division, it's cool.
It's like football.
Yeah, like football. Like when you win a division, every year of my life with the NBA, it's been the NBA doesn't have enough things to win. And I think I think there's an acknowledgement of the league that that's the case. The play-in game is kind of an attempt to, here's a thing you won, but it's kind of a booby prize. It's like, congrats, you get to get slaughtered.
It's just trying to make the Sacramento Kings feel good about existing, and they apparently can't even do that. So
right. So, but winning a division for a bye is 1, a real benefit, and 2, something that those 4 teams can be really proud of. Okay. So then the remaining wild cards, they just get put into 5-round series against each other. So shorter series, there's more variance, but you're still gonna have larger playoff games. The winners of those wild card series then would play the teams with the byes, and then you just progress, playoffs as normal, 1 versus 8, 2. Okay. So here's where it fixes the draft. So now so many teams are in the playoffs, 24. There's only 8 teams left in the lottery, and you just give them all even odds. So it's like maybe you tweak it, but it's like close to flat odds for the lottery for the 8 teams that miss the playoffs. The schedule then, because these are extended playoffs, they can be 68 game schedule. You do a home and home with every team. So that's 62 games, 31, times 2. And then you do 2 more games with the other 3 teams in your division. It's a 68 game schedule. So that's my manifesto. I think the league would generate a lot more revenue. Okay. I think you'd have a higher percentage of playoff basketball versus regular season.
Yes.
You could spread the games a little more, such that you're not playing as many back-to-backs.
Yeah.
So and again, it makes divisions matter. We have these divisions in basketball that just it's like, what, we're in the Atlantic, like who cares? Like it's funny, I see him like on
I don't even
apps.
remember who, like I forget who's in our division.
Here, I want to quit. Just guess.
I know.
There's 4 other. Okay.
Yeah, it's the Nets.
Okay.
It's the Nets, the Knicks, the Celtics, and the Raptors. I think.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But I mean, I think the Wizards, I don't know. They might have been there once upon a time. I honestly don't. Right. You wouldn't know. But anyway, that's my thought of you get more games to win. You get a much more interesting draft. Because
Question. When we add the teams, do Memphis and Minnesota come to the East? I assume because Seattle and Las Vegas are in the West.
Yeah, let me find.
They would have to, right? Because
there's a map.
Oh well, New Orleans could come over to the East too, but then again, if you're like,
all right, so here's your divisions. You go Seattle, Portland, Sacramento, and Golden State.
Okay,
that's like the Northwest.
Okay,
then you do Vegas, Phoenix, and the 2 LA teams. That's like your Southwest.
Okay,
you have, I'll call it the flyover division. Is the
Utah liberal elitist?
Yeah, Utah, Denver, Oklahoma, and Grizzlies.
Okay.
Then you have like Texas division, which is the 3 Texas teams: Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and then you throw Pelicans in there.
Okay, New Orleans. All right.
Then Florida, so you have Miami, Orlando, Charlotte, and Atlanta. So there's like your Southeast. The kind of northern division would be Minnesota, Milwaukee, Chicago, and Indianapolis. Then you have Toronto. This is where you could kind of like, if you wanted to, however you want to do them, there's these Toronto, Detroit, Cleveland, and Washington. This is where you might like start to shift people.
Right.
But then our division would be the 2 New York teams, Celtics, Sixers.
Okay. That makes sense to me.
That is just anger. That is the Northeast corridor. That is just Irish and Italian Americans just yelling at each other.
It would be the NFC East of the NBA, which is basically just a bunch of Italian and Irish.
Just bunch of mental illness, really. Unfortunately.
No, but the one thing I want to say though is, how does that math add up? Because didn't we add 2 West Coast teams? And we only have Minnesota moving to the East.
Oh,
was there 5 teams in the division?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
like,
9, 10, 11.
Because there's 30 teams in the NBA right now, right?
No, you would do 16.
16 and 16.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who.
Did you forget a team?
Yeah, who jumped? No, I just named 4 in each, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8. There's 8 clusters here.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, that division with your West is the LA division, the Northwest division, the division with the Grizzlies and the Jazz.
As you very elitist.
That's right. The flyover. That's right. The flyover division. That's really just targeted at the Jazz. Let's be honest. and Denver because of the Jokic stuff.
Yes, fair.
And then I guess you would put like the Texas team in the West, like the Texas division, the Pelicans. So then the East, so who jumps from the East is Minnesota.
So there's 1 team though, and you added 2 teams, right? Didn't you add Seattle and Vegas?
Yeah. So, but Minnesota jumps to the East, and but I'm staring at it adding up. So who am I like missing? I gotta send you this map.
Send me it. I need to see it.
I'm gonna send this to you right now because this is. I don't know why. I mean, they're on here. I'm just not seeing it.
This is great podcast content. People.
It really is. It's like they're like, what are they talking about with this?
I need to see this now. I need to see who you forgot, because now I can't even think of any teams.
All right, so I just DM'd it to you.
Okay, hold on. I can't believe you're such a sicko to have this mapped out. Oh, someone did.
This is not my map. A friend sent me this with someone like drew a geographic concept, and I was like, oh, that's better than I had like a worse version of this.
Right. We're gonna remember exactly who we left off right when we get out of here.
That's absolutely it. You're gonna have the same problem I just did.
Yep, exactly. I don't understand how we're missing. We have to be missing a team. I don't know. Maybe all of this is just moot, and maybe I'm just making things up in my brain, but the math doesn't add up to me there.
Well, there's 30 teams right now. Yeah, right. You added 2 to the West. Oh, well, no, it's so you need 16 in each. Oh, this is so embarrassing. It's just a math thing. So right now you have 15 in each, right? You add 2 to the West, so now it's 17 and 15, and then all you just need to do is move over 1, and we have 16 and 16. All
All right. Well,
That's right.
I will be editing this part of the podcast out.
It's late. I'm not even. I'm dead.
It's not,
sober.
no, I have no excuse. I'm wide awake, dude. This is literally just
man.
me being like, how did my brain just? I am keeping this in now. That's an amazing ender to this episode. That I just forgot basic math when you.
Yeah, you had me questioning my very soul. I'm like, why can't I see it? I was like Charlie Kelly at the board. Like,
what the fuck?
And this is a very Charlie Kelly-esque map. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I do. I do see it. I might. Oh God, I'll have to share this image on Twitter whenever I post the episode. I'm literally like brain dead. But that's a good place to end it. Oh my God.
Sorry.
No, you're good, dude. You're great. I can't believe that people are gonna just be listening to the last 5 minutes of this podcast and be like, what the fuck are they even talking about?
Math, baby.
Yeah, that's why I failed math, dude. It's the only class I ever failed in my life. Algebra 2. All right. Emart, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, dude. Had a great time talking with you, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you, Trill.
Peace, bud.
Bye.